let's talk about Howard University. Right now, there's been some protests happening over there about conditions of dorms. You are a Howard alumni, as many people.
No,
You're not?
mm-mm.
Oh, I
I'm
always said you were.
UDC. No, my father got his PhD from there.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Greg Carr teases me and says I grew up on the campus. I was in Howard University Children's Theater when I was 9 years old.
Okay.
I was in Upward Bound. I've been on that campus most of my life.
Okay.
I went there for a hot second when I got out of high school, but I'm a proud graduate of UDC. But a lot of our political organizing, because I came out of an umbrella organization called the United Pan-African Front, and Howard University student organizations were part of it. American University students, Catholic University students, Trinity University students, George Washington University students were all part of it. So because we spent a lot of time up there, it was assumed that I go to Howard. But no. So it was always just a place to organize. And as a matter of fact, when we organized an event called Peace Productions, where we boycotted Virginia Beach after the National Guard viciously assaulted defenseless African students just down there to have a good time Labor Day weekend in 1989. The demonstration and boycott almost was stopped because UDC student leadership and Howard student leadership couldn't get their heads together. And we were the referee and said, riding for Howard on this level, riding for UDC this level, is like captives defending their plantation. We're only in these schools to learn as much as we can about the resistance for the purpose of waging the highest level of quality resistance. So that's how we feel about all the HBCUs. We want to make J. Edgar Hoover's worst nightmare come true. Turn those places into training grounds for African resistance, which is another one of the miracles we want to perform. Number one, make the wokesters insomniacs, and number two, transform the island of Black excellence into a training ground for African resistance. And for people who can't hang with that, one-way tickets to Zamunda and Wakanda, call it a day. But that's the goal right now. So yes, so we watched the protest very carefully, and people have been asking us about it. So we'll share how we feel. Congratulations to those 18-year-olds, because dealing with housing conditions puts you right in line with the global fight for sustainable development goals. There are 17 of them, but housing is a very important one. At a moment in history where African people are 43% of the homeless in the United States, even though we're 12% of the population, by taking that stand, you identified with them. By dealing with rats and roaches on your campuses, which you brought attention to, and leakages of sewers, everybody that lives in the projects and housing units all over the United States, everybody that lives in slum conditions in the United States, people who still live in outhouses in the United States, they could identify with you, and you made them proud. And we're proud of you for doing that, especially at the age of 18, 19, who many of them were. But at the same time, we can go one or two ways with this. We can run around like some people have already started doing and critiquing the demonstration, criticizing the generation, being an opportunist scumbag under the guise of constructive criticism. You can have people who do that, and we know many are going to leap at that opportunity because it's just in their nature. That's just how they roll. Or we can challenge the students. Let's take it back to 3 years ago when they had another protest dealing with administrative corruption called Operation HU Resist. And one of the students who I met, a young man named Juan McFarland, shout out to the brother if he's watching this, we were talking about the students taking a bed sheet, I believe it was, writing Kwame Ture's name on it and putting it over Mordecai Johnson's name on it, the most well-known, most decorated president in the history of Howard. So when I met the young brother Juan at African Liberation Day, I said, based on that expression, based on that sentiment, brother, the next demonstration going to be down the street? He said, down the street. I say, yeah. Because down the street from Howard University's administration building, for those of you who may not know the Howard University landscape, lies a building called the Ralph Bunche Policy Center. And I'm telling you, what goes on there is more filthier than all the rats and roaches in Washington, D.C. There, the United States Agency for International Development lurks like the snake that it is. There, the late Charles Rangel made an arrangement with the HBCU community saying that there's a disparity in public policy and Africans need to get in on that. So that means more Franklin Williams, who was Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's classmate, but was the U.S. ambassador to Ghana, and says he didn't know anything about the coup. So either he was stupid or powerless and they didn't respect him. More Condoleezza Rices, more Susan Rices, more Johnny Carsons, that type of thing. That's what they're training. That's what they're preparing the students for. If you look at the African Studies Department at Howard, the Pentagon's influence is all over it. And I told Brother Juan, in case you didn't know, and some of your listeners don't know, Brother Kwame chose Howard University because when he was visiting, he saw the students protesting the House of Un-American Activities Committee, who he said he hated as a child because of what they did to Paul Robeson. So the fact that Howard University, and if you see Howard University's shuttle bus riding around the city, you know what they have on their shuttle bus? Howard University, home to the most Peace Corps volunteers in the HBCU community. And the Peace Corps is the only difference to compare the Peace Corps to the CIA, the difference between them is the difference between the Ku Klux Klan and the White Citizens Council. So the fact that in 2021, Howard is sending our babies to the Peace Corps, sending our babies to the United States Agency for International Development, sending our babies to the Pentagon. During Colin Powell's tenure on the Board of Trustees, he used that position at Howard to make sure that ROTC was back on every HBCU in the country. So if the students are, and so the biggest fear always at Howard University is those students may be protesting roaches, protesting rats, protesting stale lunches, protesting stale dinners. But after conversations with some of us, those protests could turn into saying USAID off of Howard's campus, Pentagon off of Howard's campus, CIA off of Howard's campus, especially since they're gravitating to some of the freedom fighters that they say they're part of. Howard University is a microcosm of our community. There's a part of Howard that welcomed Maurice Bishop on campus, welcomed Robert Mugabe on campus, welcomed Ahmed Sekou Touré on campus, welcomed Haile Selassie on campus. But there's another part of the campus that made Colin Powell comfortable, that makes the CIA comfortable, that makes the Pentagon comfortable, that makes ruthless Fortune 500 companies comfortable. As a matter of fact, my dad told me when he was there completing his doctorate, the person who was teaching Southern African history was a member of RENAMO, the CIA mercenary unit that was set up to overthrow Samora Machel and Frelimo in Mozambique. And for those of you who embrace the amputated narrative of the African experience, guess what? If you didn't know, when you wanted to be a guerrilla in the Mozambican struggle, you had to escape to Tanzania for training. They patterned their escape route after looking at the Underground Railroad. In case you don't feel you have a connection, that's why we did a play called Araminta and Samora, liberating the oppressed, treating the sick. Because Samora Machel, before he was president of Mozambique, he was a nurse. So men can be nurses, and his middle name was Moises. That's how you say Moses in Portuguese. So all we're saying to all our friends, all our contemporaries, whether it's the author Jelani Cobb, whether it's Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is teaching there now, whether it's my childhood friend, the internationally acclaimed journalist Erica Blanc-Denoir, who interviewed Comandante Fidel Castro, whether it's Mayor Ras Baraka, whether it's his sister Maria Jones, a co-founder of the Mass Emphasis Children's and History Theater Company, whether it's the attorney Donald Temple, we have to sit down and talk about how Howard University is being used to promote a genocidal foreign policy, a genocidal Africa policy. And if the students are ready to protest that, we've got to have their back, because when it's all said and done, we shouldn't tell them to be fighting against things that and fighting for things that we're not fighting for. So it's going to take a fighter already fighting to tell them to join the fight. So it's never about criticizing them, but always challenging them. And we speak from experience. When we were their age, when there's a building on Howard's campus the UDC used to own called Miners Teachers College, that Howard bought back. In that building, in 1992, we organized a press conference to give the Libyans an opportunity to respond to the false claims that they blew up a Pan Am plane. So even though we were young, and when the Worldwide African Anti-Zionist Front created in Libya in 1990, those meetings used to be at Howard University. We've got a track record of doing work up there. We've been doing work up there. Mass Emphasis Children's History and Theater Company has performed 8 plays at Howard University. My father's homegoing celebration was at the infamous Rankin Chapel. So we're no strangers to the campus, but we're saying that the time has come to challenge the students as they're gravitating to a more militant approach to life itself, to take on issues that reflect that. And bring this back to Cuba, 15 years ago, that Bunch Center, a comrade of ours in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, and he'll verify this, named Dr. John Trimble, he took 15 students to Cuba, Sister Tyranny. You know what the Bunch Center did? They found the names of the students, had a secret meeting with them, and gave them a list of people in Cuba to meet with, which means they already had people planted in Cuba working with the US government to plan the type of demonstrations that you're starting to see in Cuba right now, as early as 15 years ago. Before that, right around that time, we were doing work with the chapter of the American Medical Students Association on Howard's campus. The president was a beautiful sister named Dr. Wanda Guy Craft. And they had a seminar on World AIDS Day, giving the Cuban diplomats a chance to come and talk about their work to eradicate AIDS in the world, as they have the lowest HIV/AIDS rate in the Americas. And at that time, it was not too long after Comandante Fidel Castro said if the resources were ever available, Cuba would deploy 4,000 doctors to Mother Africa to stay in Africa until AIDS was done away with. They would fight HIV/AIDS the way they fought Batista, fight HIV/AIDS the way we had 300 rebellions in Cuba, so on and so on. And now these are the medical students on the campus. They couldn't find a room in the chemistry building and the biology building or any of the other buildings that medical students are. They couldn't find a room to have this program. But in the main room in the Bunch Center, that was the room that was available. So it's safe to say that intelligence agents filmed our seminar that day. So that's the type of activity that's going on at Howard University. It's been going on. I remember also, the MDC, the regime change agents that were set up to overthrow the Zimbabwean government. We caught them having a meeting at Howard with the Zimbabwe desk of the Voice of America. So yes, there's a Howard that's connected to the revolution, but there's a Howard connected to neocolonialism. There's a Howard connected to neoliberalism. There's a Howard connected to some of the most fascist, genocidal activity that Africans have been subjected to. And the students, in the name of the people they admire, in the names of the people that professors like Greg Carr are teaching them about, it's time for them to let Howard know that Howard isn't big enough for both of those subcultures. It's either got to embrace the subculture synonymous with our resistance, or it's got to embrace the fascist, white supremacist conquerors, and let's just let everything sort itself out. So that is our challenge to not only Howard students, but that is our challenge, especially to our contemporaries who may not be politically active anymore, but whenever they see students protesting at Howard, they get back in fight mode, at least for 34 days, at least for 15 days, at least for 15 minutes. But they're not equipped to challenge the students to take on the most defining issues of this historical moment, because unfortunately, at this moment in history, they are no longer on the front line.